and dreams. Thank you for joining me here today. My name is Mallory, in case we haven't met. It has been a while since I have posted. The last video that I shared was the very start of my garden last year, and then I kind of stopped filming. So in this video today, I just want to review my garden over the past year. I'm going to show you a lot of video footage and a lot of pictures that I had from the past year to show you how beautiful the garden behind me truly became in the spring garden of 2024. As you can see, I've added a few things. We have added a couple trellises. We have added a watering system. So I will go into that in depth later on in this video. But come along, follow with me as we fall in love with the garden that I had last year. Here we have a picture of the garden in August of last year when it was in full bloom. The flowers look pretty, and it was absolutely my favorite time of year for this garden. The first time I have completed any garden to this magnitude. So for the purpose of this video, I will go through each bed. We will label them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I will tell you a little bit about what I grew in each bed, what went well and what did not go well, as well as a couple of the beds I grew some fall and winter crops in. So I will explain that further on into the video. Okay, so we will start with bed number 1, which is my tomatoes. All right, so if you look back at my previous videos, you will see that I started my tomatoes from seeds about 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost. In this first picture, you can see I buried them real deep so they can have that root system grow really well. The 2 tomatoes that I grew in this bed were Florida Everglades, or they're also called currant tomatoes, and San Marzanos. Also alongside the tomatoes, I grew marigolds and basil. I didn't really think through this bed completely. Didn't really think about a trellis system at first. I was more using it for the sun aspect of my garden. And as you can see, I kind of improvised with my trellising system. I didn't have any cow panels or anything at this point. So I used what was called a Florida trellis or a Florida weave. It's like twine that you crisscross around the stems to try to hold the plant up. It did ultimately work. It just didn't look as pretty as it probably could have. My goal for tomatoes this year is to plant them along one of my cow panels so they can grow and be free along there. So what went well as far as these tomatoes is I did get about 2 gallon-sized bags of San Marzano tomatoes before the entire crop died. I believe it was a tomato fruit worm, or they also call them a corn earworm. But my crop, it went plant by plant and it completely died. I did try to save them. I used neem oil. I think I just started the process late. Again, I'm new to this gardening on this magnitude, so these kind of bugs that I was trying to fight were kind of new to me. Also, I didn't have my watering system in place at the very beginning of this garden, and I think I may have let them get too dry in the sun. As the Florida heat came on, I wasn't watering my tomatoes as much as I should have for that particular heat. So I think it was a combination of both as to why my tomatoes did not survive as long as they could have. I did turn this bed into a compost bed, or attempt to do a compost bed, and that's currently where it's at right now. I don't really know what my plans are for this bed for this year. Okay, so moving on to bed 2, which is where I grew the 3 sisters. So for those of you who aren't familiar with 3 sisters, it is a combination of growing corn, squash, and beans. This bed was so fun to grow. All of the seeds were direct sow, so it was very simple when it came to the planting part. I didn't have to worry about all of the indoor seedlings and those kind of things. It was real easy just to place the seeds into the ground. What went well with this was my beans. They grew the easiest. Beans provide a lot of nitrogen to the soil, and they grew wonderful. The squash and the corn, on the other hand, I did have some difficulty with those. Where the bed is laid, there's not a lot of wind, or at this point in the year, there wasn't a lot of bees to kind of help pollinate the area. So I did have to do a lot of manual pollinating for the squash and the corn. I did get some corn. I kind of harvested it too early just because I was unfamiliar. And the squash, I was able to grow successful squash later on in the year, but not in the beginning. I would place these slightly different if I was to do the Three Sisters again, which I do hope to do in the future. I placed all my corn in the back and then beans up front with the squash, and I would have laid that out differently if I was to repeat this, as well as I used bush beans, and for this method to truly work, you need a pole bean. So the pole beans, they use the corn stalk to climb up, and that uses their trellis, while the squash kind of covers as a ground cover. And that's how they all three simultaneously grow in harmony. So I am excited to try this again. But yes, there is some things I learned from this year, and I will be doing it in the next garden. Okay, so bed 3. This was my sweet potato bed turned into flower bed. Initially, I didn't really know what I was going to do with this bed, and I don't talk about it very much in my other videos, but it did house my sweet potato slips, and for a while, it was just sweet potatoes and marigolds. But as the season progressed, I started to throw different flower seeds into there, as well as sunflowers. And it ultimately became one of my favorite beds. As you can see in some of these photos, I was starting to get butterflies, which are near and dear to me, as well as some bees started to come around. And it just made my garden feel happy. There was lots of colors that came from this bed. And having never really grown flowers from seeds before, I was super excited with how this bed ultimately turned out. And it opened up the doors for more flower planting in my future. Onto bed 4, which was my potato and cilantro bed. I learned a lot from this bed. I learned that when it comes to russet potatoes or honey potatoes, what I was growing, that you need to add dirt as they grow. Didn't learn that. So my crop overall was fairly small. I'm honestly not really pleased with the outcome, and I don't think I'll be growing potatoes this season. At least not these kind of potatoes. I'm up for sweet potatoes again, completely different type of crop. And I'm excited for what this bed will be this year, as I have added a trellis to this bed. So I have a ton of different trellising plants that I want to see flourish in this bed, and I'm super excited for that. On to bed 5, my pepper bed. Literally probably my favorite bed to grow. Watching them grow from seeds, and as long as they take to grow, they feel so rewarding when you actually get a pepper coming off of the plant. So in this bed this year, I grew jalapenos. They are Craig's Jumbo jalapenos, cayenne peppers, and cherry peppers, also known as cherry bombs. I also had in a couple of bell peppers. They didn't do that great. So while I did attempt to grow them, before they actually went into a full bell pepper, a bug would get to them, and I honestly don't even think I had one edible one that I used. But anyways, peppers, they are my favorite thing to grow thus far, just because of the time and the energy that it takes to grow them. They are so rewarding. I will say that this year for my garden, I will not be planting my peppers in bed 5. The reason being is because, as you can see in the pictures, this bed is closest to the oak tree, and it does get a lot of shade. Some of my other beds get more sun, and peppers truly thrive in the sun. So I kind of misplaced them this last spring. While I did get some crops, I'm hoping to get a lot more in the coming season. On to bed 6. This was my tomatillo and onion bed. And this bed basically was a wash by the end of the season. So my tomatillos, while I did great with them the previous season, this year I did not. And that's because I learned the hard way that tomatillos need a companion plant to be able to produce the fruit. So the tomatillo that you see in this picture, it is one large plant, and while it flowered like none other, it never gave me a tomatillo, and that's because it was just one plant by itself. So you have to grow multiple tomatillo plants to actually get a crop. And now moving on to the onions. So the onions I had in this bed, they were onion starts. However, they were long day onion starts and not short day. So ultimately, what I got from this bed was some green onions. I did put them on some baked potatoes, and I did eat them as I grew them, but I never actually got an onion from them. So this year I am growing onion starts from, I believe, Texas Grande onions, and they are short day onions, and I'm hoping to have a much better crop this year. They're already in one of my beds, and I hope for success, so we'll see what happens. On to bed 7, which was carrots and cucumbers. So the start of this season, I did not have a trellis for the cucumbers to grow. However, they still gave me some really nice cucumbers. The straight 8 variety is my favorite. I grew a jade cucumber, if I'm remembering the name right, once I got the trellis, and they initially took off great, but then I'm not sure if I was overwatering at this point or underwatering, or if it was just too hot out, but they didn't really grow great cucumbers. However, they did look beautiful on the trellis, so I was happy just to have the greenery. The carrots, as you can see, they turned out, we ate several of them. My dog absolutely loves them. She would take them straight out of the ground when I'd hand them to her. But I'm hoping to add some more dirt to this bed this year. Make sure the dirt stays loose because I really want to get more of the length on the carrots. Some of the carrots, as you can see, they're really round, but they're just not as long. So I'm really wanting to create some loose dirt so they can grow much longer this year. Bed 8. This was very much a random bed. I got all the raised beds placed in October, November of 2023, and so as soon as I got dirt in them, I was wanting to grow something. So this first bed right here became kind of a guinea pig bed. I started off with some fall winter crops, which was some lettuce, arugula. I did throw some collards down, just trying to see kale, I believe, just trying to see what I could grow. And ultimately, when spring came around, some of that stuff was still growing, so I didn't really have plans for it in a spring-summer garden other than to let it grow. As you can see, then once I put the trellis on there, I wanted to see something vine, and what I ultimately was already growing at that time in the bed was watermelon. So I attempted to trellis watermelon. I know you guys can laugh at me. But it seemed like a good idea. My husband was real sweet. He tried to make me some little wire hangers. I'll see if I can find a picture to try to hold the watermelons in place. And I did get a sizable watermelon. Definitely not the greatest at it. I have been told multiple times that watermelons are really easy. However, they were not for me. Don't know if I'll be growing watermelons again this year. Maybe. We'll see. But this bed, ultimately at the end of it, was very random. I still don't have exact plans for what I'm doing for this bed in the spring, so we shall see. The bed does currently have some snap peas that are trellised in the front, and I know those aren't going to last very long as soon as that heat picks up, but maybe I'll get some snap peas off of there. And then there's some onions on the one side that I had extra from the onion starts I purchased. So we'll see where that bed ultimately ends up. So that concludes all 8 beds. In the beginning of this video, I talked about how I was going to go through the watering system and the trellis system, but I believe I'm going to make that a separate video after doing the editing for all of this video. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you for following along and watching this far. If you like this content, please like and subscribe and follow along with me as I grow this season's garden.